Welcome to my Accent is No Accident podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Perez, and we are here today with a lady that is a strategic planning expert and revenue growth expert who has helped corporations increase their sales and gain more profit. Her name is Randi-Sue. Randi-Sue Deckard has a career trajectory that is captivating. Her story of transformation and resilience is a transformation in transition clinical lab scientist to a senior vice president of client engagement at Besler. Her journey is a testament to the power of embracing change and leveraging data-driven decision making. Her wealth experience in sales, marketing, and customer success positions her as a valuable guide for professionals seeking to excel their revenue-related roles. Randy's journey and expertise offer a unique perspective on navigating career transitions and overcoming fear, making her a compelling source of inspiration for those looking to enhance sales performance and drive business growth through data-driven strategies. Welcome, Randy. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Maritza. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you.
Me too. I love our first conversation. And before we get it, I would like to ask you our first question. Randy, what is your accent and why is not an accident?
So, it really relates to my journey of transformation, and that was going from a clinical lab scientist to the commercial world of healthcare, and realizing that what I was trained to do, and that was to experiment, which just means I was trained to fail forward, to have really strong processes, look at data, and using data, decide what was the best decision or lever to pull in that experiment. And if you take all of that and apply it to business, that's why when I went over to the commercial side of healthcare, I had a very rapid rise into leadership roles because the way I was trained lent to go-to-market processes. And it's interesting that I've been to some recent conference, CRO, summit, which is Chief Revenue Officer Summit. And the way we were talking, I felt very validated because they were talking about being process driven. They threw up a picture of Deming, and I'm like, oh, I've been doing this all along. And some people couldn't understand how I transitioned, how I got so quickly, and the way I thought. And and I think that's why is because the science aspect of being so process and data driven applies to business, but the art, like having a conversation, business is human to human, right? So you can never lose sight of that. But having both, bringing those together, was where the magic happens.
I see that. I love it. And when I was reading your bio, and first of all, we had a conversation, but then I read your bio and I'm like, wow, coming from a clinical, like a scientist's behavior to coming to sales and grow revenue, I'm like, that is kind of perfect because you are driven.
Yeah.
So
and you want to, like, in sales and marketing, like go to market aspect, you're always testing. You hear about, AB, right? Like you send this email to one group, you send a different email to another group. Well, like I said, that's basically experimenting, right? So reframing what I learned and how I was trained to business was just like I said, it really helped me. But being able to have a process and look and change one thing at a time and know what I changed and document it. That's the other thing I think is huge
Uh,
in research and in medicine. If you didn't document it, it never happened, right? And so when I came to the commercial side, I was always amazed that some of these businesses like didn't have processes. And I'm like, how can you not have a process written? And in sales specifically, I talk about frameworks, and that gives flexibility because every person's different how they talk. And once again, to my comment about sales as a human to human interaction, you want to give them guardrails of how they should do discovery, how they should interact, but you still want them to be their authentic self. And that's where I talk about the art and science of go to market. But still, you can look at the data and see where an individual may be struggling. Maybe they're really good at getting a meeting, but they struggle at the discovery. Or maybe someone's really good at the discovery, but isn't so good at the close. Once again, using data, adapt for that individual. And once again, I think having that data driven mindset, but also never forgetting the art, which I just consider the human interaction, is critical.
exactly. And I think that it's important to talk about this, what you just said. There are many companies, and especially medium-sized companies and small companies that do have processes, but each person kind of does their own thing.
Mhm.
But there is not really something that is written on how to really the company wants to do things. Um, to set up kind of like the culture of the company.
Yeah. And you think about it, I always look at go to market as a whole bunch of puzzle pieces, right? So your, marketing pre-sales is all about your brand and raising awareness. You have the sales aspect, you have implementation onboarding, and then, like a customer success account management function. That's just the go-to market. But what about operations or development or finance or your customer service department? Like if you have like a 1-800 hotline, whatever the case may be, all of those pieces have to come together. And what I've found is that, every business that I've worked in, communication and silos are the two biggest problems always. And no matter how good the company is, there's always going to be some miscommunication or some type of silo. But the more that you can break those down and have the puzzles pieces closer together, fitting, talking to one another, aligned, so much better. And I think that, you know, um, having like a closed loop feedback. So especially on the post sales side, what are your customers saying? How are they articulating? How is that information being used in your sales process, in your marketing brand messaging? How do other people in the company talk about it? And there's a book that was written by Jeannie Bliss. It was called Chief Customer Officer, and I read it. I don't know. I don't want to say how many years ago, but I read it a long time ago. And in it, she talks about earning the right and how companies that do it well, they have a culture of being customer centric, and it's not just words. Oh, hey, we're customer centric on our website. They literally start every business meeting internally with a customer story, so everyone learns about how the customer talks and acts. And I just think it's so critical, and so many companies miss the mark because they don't actually engage with their customers, understand how their customers talk about them, and or how they're using their product or
Yeah.
service.
And I think that it's very important to notate here that many times we go as business owners, we go to, okay, I need to sell, but are we checking on the response? Are we checking on that? Um, what is the behavior of your strategy? What is the behavior of the things that are happening? So many times things that, like for instance in my business, the things that work for my client A don't do not work for client B.
Absolutely. So you have to segment, right? So that's another layer. So some businesses, have a more simple go-to market motion. And by simple, I mean it's just one, right? Like they literally have one message to one group of people. And there are businesses out there like that. And then there are some that are layered, whether it's layered or more complex because you have to segment your customers for different reasons, whether it's by size or what they need, or sometimes it's you have some customers who maybe you offer like a free trial. So it's what we call product-led growth. They get to try it first and then they convert to paying, right? And that may be fine for like individual users, but then if you have like a group of users like enterprise, you have to contact someone, right? So those are two
Yes.
different motions. And that's where, like, if you're not talking and learning as a group and then as a larger group, and understanding how much does it cost to acquire that customer? How much does it cost to serve that customer? I think one of the greatest things that any company can do is make sure that all the stakeholders understand the business unit economics. A lot of people are not fluent in the P&L, and you don't have to like show all your cards, but people need to understand on average it costs X to acquire a customer. If something takes longer, that you can assume that it and ended up costing the company more. So what does that mean on the back end? Do you need to retain that customer longer? There's a term CLTV, which just means customer lifetime value. So having everyone understand those metrics and have it be um, your OKRs for your whole company are understood, and then by department everyone's working towards the same goal. They may not have the same eye, but they're working towards that same OKR, if that makes sense.
Exactly. So, just for the listeners that are like, what is an OKR? What is a
Oh,
KPI?
objective key results. So it's just, there are a lot of acronyms in business, and then I'm in healthcare and we have even more. So it's just, it's your key metrics that you're looking at, right? And as a business, you typically have 3 to 5. But then when you think about those, how does each system in the business, so you have marketing, you have operations, you have finance, you have sales, you have customer success. How does each department, what are the things that they need to 3 to 5 things they need to focus on and measure to make sure that you're meeting those key objectives for the organization? So you always have a strategy, 3 to 5 things, and then each department's like, how are we going to achieve those? And it may look a little differently, but when you roll it up, it's all so you can achieve as an organization. And that's where, if you have silo or miscommunication, or not everyone is driving towards the same OKR through their KPIs, that can be a huge issue.
And it is incredible because one of the things that I would like to talk about here is people do not realize how important it is to keep their company diverse, and they can measure that. How is it to have my company open, diverse type, different type of clients,
Mm-hmm.
different type of products that serve many in lieu
Right.
of just one small um, group. So these can be measured.
Yep. 100%. And this is why, as I've gone up the ladder, I've tried to stay as close to the customer as I can. So even though I'm an SVP, I do talk to customers. as an executive sponsor, and it's really to understand how our products and services, and I want to hear it in their words. So, and that's where some of our best ideas come from for what I call edge services. Hey, we have a lot of customers using our product or service this way. There's something on the edge that we could also monetize that I'm hearing from, 100 plus customers. This might be valuable. Let's go look at that. Or, hey, our customers are using it this way and we didn't design it that way, but that's how we're using it. Like, what else could we do to make that more valuable to them, right? And so, as a sales, they have a term, they talk about recurring impact or value. Um, and I think it applies. It doesn't matter what business, right, that you're in. It's not just SaaS, it's services as well. And even B2C, which just means, a consumer buying a product. You don't buy something unless you get value from it. And and it's really critical that you talk to your customers. And, if you're first starting out, that's part of the testing. You don't know, right? Maybe you have someone say, "Hey, you should sell that," and you try and you experiment and you fail forward and you come back to the drawing board, you go again, and that's all business really is one big experiment. And I know some people think that's a little contrarian, but you are always tweaking and you're always iterating. If you have processes, you can iterate. You know what's worked before and what you need to change now. And it's also how you can address changes in the market, whether, something happens and you're noticing that people are leaving. Why are they leaving? Well, I found another product cheaper. Okay. Like, were you aware of that? So that's just I guess, a small example, but I think it's really important that you're always looking at what I call your whole ecosystem. And that's basically just end to end, always looking for ways that you can improve. And once again, that goes back to my science background of quality and process improvement. And what I'm doing in go-to-market is always like, how can we be better? How can I delight a customer more? Period. How can I earn the right? How can I continue to earn the right to that customer's business?
And wow, that is super insightful, because I bet many people, although they they have driven their sales with a strategic planning. They keep their data, and they think they know their customer, but have they truly talked to the customer? And
Yeah, and lots of times like when I advise in my 5 to 9, and I'll ask questions and I'll listen to calls, very heavy on product feature. They don't talk like the customer. And, a customer who's even been a customer for a while, no one's really spoken to them, so they understand from the customer's point of view how they're using the product, why they find it valuable, and they're missing out on a huge opportunity. And they're also missing out on referrals if you're not talking to us. There's a gold mine out there on the customer end, and you just have to speak to your customers to get that information. Ask for referrals at different stages. Ask what they're finding valuable, and when you hear it in their own words, it can really change how you message on the front end and even impact your sales process.
hi, I'm very happy to know you are here watching our podcast today. It is an honor to be featuring so many entrepreneurs on the journeys of their inside voice, their accent that is not an accident. And we want to reach out more people like you who are creating a better world of diversity, inclusiveness, equity, and belonging. So please take a moment to hit the subscribe button below, like, and share to others. And even if you want to leave a comment, that'll be nice. Thank you for your support. And now back to the episode. Correct. And also, I would like to mention in the B2C or B2B business, um, when you have a customer that you had for many, many years, that is the
Mm-hmm.
best person or the best way to prove, test your, your, your product or services are working.
Yeah.
Be, because that person is always going to say, you know what, I would like to have more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And they are going to be very open about giving you feedback because they have been the ones using it for so long.
Right. And I always, you know, customers who've been with us or been with any company for a while that aren't willing to talk, that always makes me nervous.
Yeah.
If they're not willing to give feedback, does that mean it's just more status quo for them? Yeah, they use it, but they're not wowed by it. Um, and I think that's one of the things or the dangers some businesses also get in, that they don't focus on the recurring impact and delighting the customer continually. And there are things that you can do throughout the customer journey to delight a customer, including in how you invoice. And this is why I talk about all the puzzle pieces, making sure you're delighting the customer along the way. And that book, Chief Customer Officer Gene Bliss, you know, um, gives a lot of tactical advice that any business owner, whether you're B2C or B2B, can apply to their business. It's been more than 10 years ago, but it's still valid today. So,
Yes, I love this conversation. And I would like to switch a little bit because when you are customer driven, when you're in sales, you also need to have a specific mindset.
yes.
And you need to realize that you cannot stay within the same square or
Hmm.
box all the time. You need to have a growth mindset. I would like you to give me your insight on that.
Yeah, so it is really critical when you're in sales to have a growth mindset. You know, people may define this in different ways, but the way that I define that is basically continuous learning and improving. Where you start is not where you end up, and it's a journey. It's a journey, right? You got to hold up the mirror and say, what could I do better today? And, I think there's no excuse now between all the different things on social media, between LinkedIn, YouTube, or if you have a budget, master classes, books, there's no excuse to be able to learn and treat your profession like a craft where how can I get better every time? And, there's a lot of analogies between sports players and sales. And, I actually get it because what do some of the sports people do? Sometimes it's literally like a runner. They're winning by like 0.0001 seconds, right? Like it's so small. And that's why focusing on improving 1% every day is crucial. And once again, how do you know? Um, how do you know where you need to improve? And this is where I'm a huge fan of always having a coach and finding mentors. They may or may not be at your company, but I think it's really important that someone who's ahead of you, where you're headed, that can help guide you and coach you, but also looking at what you do day to day and self-reflecting. And it doesn't have to be a huge process, but it's like, okay, what did I do well today? What could I have done better? Because as a salesperson, I remember some of my first sales call where I was actually on a phone versus being in front of a person going, oh, I wish I would have said X, or I wish I would have said right. And so I think one of the beauties of where we are at today with AI, like I said, there's truly no excuse. There is software out there as an example, one is practice, one is Dexago. There are a few others where you can literally role play as a salesperson with AI, and it will grade you, everything else. It's absolutely wild. So you don't have to test on your customers, right? Or potential customers, which, like, it's a beautiful age to be in. When I came up, we tested on each other, like role plays, and you would test it on customers. Well, you don't have to test it on customers. And I think customers are much more savvy now, right?
Yes.
And there are stats that, whether it's consumer or business or like B2B, where lots of time consumers, of your product are literally checking you out, talking to peers, and making a decision before they even, talk to a salesperson, right? And think about it yourself, like whether you need to replace something in your home, like a washing machine, fridge. What do you do? What's it for you? Maybe ask your family or friends, hey, do you like that fridge you have? I'm thinking of getting a new fridge. Well, it's no different in business, right? If
Yes.
someone's so like, hey, I heard you had this product. What do you think of the company? What was your experience? What are some of the things that I should be aware of? We all do it, right? So, anyways, just having not being able to test on customers with where we are now with AI is like, just to me, it's mind blowing. We're in a beautiful age where we can, meet our customers where they're at without testing.
Which it is really good because it brings me topic, which is it allows you to face your fears and of those things that you don't know what's going to happen. So if we use AI or we use other tools that help us play, sales without
Mhm.
having to mess up with the customer, so it will help us
Yeah,
to.
it's a huge confidence builder, right? And I think some of the best, from a sales perspective, I think some of the best sellers literally treat sales like a conversation, right? It's not an interrogation. It's about the customer, what's in it for them, not products and features and everything else. And if you can't have a conversation, or if you're not ready to have a conversation, you shouldn't be in front of a customer yet, right?
Mhm.
And if you're so nervous that you're like, oh, I need a script, you need to role play more. And if you can practice, that's how we build confidence. And one of the things I always tell my team is, like, whenever you try something new, it feels awkward, right? Like, oh,
Yes.
and as adults, we lose that sense of, oh, just let me try it. Can you remember a time when you were a child, as an example, where you just like tried something, you didn't care if the world watching, you just like, I want to do that, right? That looks fun. And
Yes.
you don't care, right? But as we get older, we care more. And I always talk about OPO, other people's opinion, right? So
Okay.
part of a growth mindset is knowing who you are at your core, knowing your self-worth, and also knowing that, as long as I learn something from this and I fail forward, I'm making progress. It's a journey, right? And you are going to fail. Anyone who says that they're, who looks super successful, they have had a lot of failure to get there, right? And it's
Yes.
also never too late to start. I always tell, people, regardless of their age or where they're at in their career, if they want to try something,
Mhm.
I always ask the question, what's the worst thing that can happen?
That nothing
You know?
happens.
Yeah, right. So, but it is hard to get out of our head, right? And I think that that's also where, having a coach or mentor can help you. And I think just having gratitude and knowing that you are evolving as a person and giving yourself grace, and just remind yourself and not listening to that inner critic that this is a journey. I am improving, and you just got to stick with it, and having that perseverance and tenacity to see it through. And, for listeners, if I can just, ask you just for a moment to imagine you're a child again when you try something new and come at it from a place of wonder. Ooh, I tried this and, oh, nothing bad happened, right? I just think that people worry too much what other people think, how they sound, how they look, the whole nine yards. A lot of times it's more in our head than it is what's happening around us.
Exactly. So I have a question. How would you say to a service provider um, to start their business? How do they start? The best way to start with their sales department, like which is themselves, but when you're starting as a solopreneur or entrepreneur, what would you tell them?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to document your process. And one of the things, we have a term, founder-led sales. So it's the person who starts the business selling. There's a difference between founder-led sales and hiring your first salesperson. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes with founder-led sales, you've leveraged your network as a founder, and people, for a variety of reasons, may have purchased from you or tried as a favor to you. And I'm not saying that everyone is doing it as a favor, but some people may have tried it as a favor. But what you want a salesperson to come in and do is do something scalable, and those are so. I think the first thing that anyone starting a business needs to realize, the way they do it and the way the business will need to scale are two different things. And the best thing that as they're ready to scale, if they don't have that skill set, they need to get out of the way. And that's a hard thing to hear when that's your baby, right?
Yeah.
So, lots of times when I'm having conversations with founders who are looking to hire their first salesperson, I ask a lot of questions about, are they mentally ready to let go and let sales build a process so they can scale their growth? Because if they're not, that person who comes in is never going to be set up for success. And there's a reason why. You'll see a lot of salespeople, they were the first salesperson and it only lasts 18 months because it sometimes it is the salesperson, but lots of times it's because the founder just didn't understand what was required for that person to be successful in that role.
Okay, so what I'm listening to is basically when you're a founder, obviously you're gonna have a period of time where you're doing things.
Yeah.
But when you hire somebody, also you need to
get out of the lane. I'm not saying you can't guide them, right? But
yes.
They need to build a process, because your process was leveraging your network. They need to build a process and train a team so that team can do it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be the same as your way, right? And sometimes that is really hard for a founder or a business owner to hear. Well, I did it this way. Why are you doing it that way? It can be hard.
Yeah, obviously, yes. Like now I'm thinking, because I have a boutique, right? So I am the salesperson, but I will say, if I hire somebody, they have to do it in a different way because they're not me.
Right. Yeah, and obviously you have standards that you want to keep, like, and there's nothing wrong with that, but
culture.
I think it's really having, just like in sales, we talk about, you're always qualifying and you're always setting expectations. It's the same thing when you're bringing in a new employee, sales or any other department. You always want to set expectations early and often, and you always want to be, when I say qualify, you always want to be verifying that there's no miscommunication. This is what you heard. We agree on this is how we're going to measure success, or this is what the next milestone is, or whatever the case may be. And I think sometimes, in our rush to onboard someone, we miss some of those steps. And we could have a whole other podcast on onboarding, because there are lots of opportunities in
Yes.
onboarding.
Yes. And in that will be phenomenal because um, there are two types of onboarding new talent and onboarding your new clients.
Yes.
And like you're a small company, you can do it very differently from client to client, but
Hmm.
as you grow, you need to define the process so that you are
Yes.
not overpaying, you're not not overpaying, but you're not spending so much time. Um, there are processes that need to be done, um, like have like a software
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
the client can do things
Yeah.
on their own.
Self-serve. Yeah. There are times when self-serve's appropriate based on their level, right? And that's where you can go back to that segmentation conversation. Like, the Pareto rule talks about 80%, the 80-20 rule. And oftentimes 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers, right? So who are your gold, platinum, whatever term you want to call that, strategic accounts, like if you're enterprise. But knowing that, and then how do you tier everyone else, and what does that mean for their implementation onboarding? So from the get-go, you can set those expectations for that customer, right?
Exactly. I love this conversation. Randy, we are coming to the end, and I would like to know how you help others. How do you help them, and how they can contact you?
Sure. So the easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. I do have a corporate job, but I do advise business founders and just salespeople or anyone in go-to market. But LinkedIn is the easiest place to connect with me.
Awesome. And it's Randi-Sue Deckard.
Yes.
And would you like to leave the audience with a last thought or something?
Yeah. I mean, just be customer obsessed and think about how you like to be valued and heard. The person on the other end feels the same way.
Oh, I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Randy, for this time. I love that conversation and definitely we'll have a part two. Um, and to you, our audience, thank you for being here with us today. And remember, you came to this world because you were loved, because the greatest source of God brought you here with love to be loved.
Hi, it's Maritza here. If you like this episode of My Accent is No Accident podcast and would like to listen more like this, subscribe wherever you're listening to it or watching it. Leave us a nice review and share with your friends, family, and network. Thanks for listening.